I'm going to call this meeting to order of the Ways and Means Tuesday, October 15th, 2024 meeting. It is 6:01 p.m. This meeting is being recorded by the Ways and Means Committee. If any other persons present are doing the same, you must notify this guy at this time. Anyone? You're recording. Okay, Anthony is recording for the record from the recorder. How appropriate to record from the record.
Newspaper record.
Dad joke. Sorry. I will do a roll call of members. I don't see anyone online. So we'll just go by who's in the room. Counselor Tronzo, that's me. Yeah, I'm here. Counselor Garrett.
Here.
Counselor Master Totero.
I'm here.
Counselor Wondolowski is not. Counselor Perry.
Here.
Right. Got approval of minutes from our September 17th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve said minutes?
So moved. Second.
All right, all in favor? All right.
Aye.
All right, all opposed? And obviously no abstentions. Good. Very well. I think if anyone here wanted to sign up for public comment, now would be the time. If your name's not already on there, I can't see that far because it's down that end. Yeah. Is anyone online like to do some public comment? If so, put that little hand raise thing up and we'll know you want to do that. All right. Well, see no one online. So Pamela, are you the only name on that list so far? All right, come on up.
Did we start early? I didn't think we did.
No, we started.
I
I started 1 minute late.
Yeah, I came late.
It's in the chat.
Hi, my name is Pamela Goodwin. I live at 54 High Street here in the city. I'm also a commissioner on GSET. I'm pleased to be actively participating. And I think my only comment is that I would love for the public, one, to try to get to the GSET meetings because we invite everybody. We have a public comment time. We have had numerous meetings where there's been no public comment. And then we've had some meetings where there has been, I think one person made a comment, but other people are there. So you can attend remotely or in person. The meetings are over in the GSET building, not at the Zon, not here in the City Hall. And I just want to encourage people to try to come to make their comment. I think it's 3 minutes long. You get to speak. Also, I have in my own building at the Weldon, I've encouraged people to try to get on YouTube and watch them after the fact. So they are recorded and the town will put them up there. And I just would love to think that especially people who are looking for the internet, wondering why the internet is not yet there, I would encourage the public to just do a little more homework, get a little more involved. I know that GSET office is taking phone calls right and left. I refer people to them. And I just wanted to say, please make your thoughts known. As a constituent in the city, whether you have the internet or you don't have the internet, don't ever want the internet, or whether you'd love to have GSET serve you, I think it's the more voices that are heard, the happier people will be. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, time's up. Public comments now closed. We have no public hearings. We have no motions. We have a discussion tonight regarding GSET's current and future financial funding and expenditures, including ARPA capital account. We have here tonight Mayor, we have Finance Director, we have John from who we invited to come and share some stats and some finances. There are two things I want to say before we start. One is kind of a little bit of housekeeping, but I don't know if I know where to put these kind of things. I understand that sometimes when we have discussions, people either hear or online might want to speak. That time is gone now. Okay, public comment, public hearings are the time when public speaks. I don't want anybody from invited guests, people on this subcommittee, people in the audience live to be like, hey, that guy's got his hand up. I don't care. It doesn't happen. I'm just saying that's how I run my meetings. They go by the way we have a much more loose kind of in our subcommittee kind of way of doing it. I'm not making everybody address the chair to address something. We can relatively talk freely as long as we're going to be civil and not talk over each other. That also being said, I understand some of the background behind the reason that this is on here. And I would hope that this would go for the full council meetings as well going forward, just some advice. But certainly I'm not interested in politicking at a finance committee meeting. This is informational requests. This is for that purpose. It's not to slander anybody. It's not to talk down to anybody. It's not to point fingers. It's question, answer, information gathering for the purpose of finance, and that's it. There are definitely other places in the world where you can do the rest of those other things. Very dark places. That being said, John, if you'd like to join us up at the table, bring any informational materials you may have. Someone wants to share the screen.
Want Fern Smith to sit with me. She is the operations manager and we're going to be answering questions. I think that is.
Okay.
So. Also, just so you can meet him, this is Bill St. Dennis. He's the chief technology officer for GSAC.
Okay.
I get you a chair?
Yeah.
It's hot. It's the same. It's why we call it active. It's the same.
This was kind of put on our plate with some questions. I would invite, and I know that you've shared some information with us. More recently, you shared some stuff prior to as well. I guess the idea of this is so that everyone's kind of on the same page of where things have gone and where they're going.
Right.
There is no particular lineup for how we go about this.
Sure.
So I guess I would welcome any kind of presentation you have, and then there may be questions. And
Fine.
also to try to fulfill the interaction. If there are still lingering questions at that point, or if there's clarification needed from the city side, we do have the mayor and the finance director here. It's going to be a little bit of back and forth in some degree or another. I don't know how that's going to play out. So I guess we'll just see where that goes.
Okay, that's fine. I wrote that I want to come here and talk about ARPA and a bond. And the thing that both of those have in common is make ready. And we all may know what make ready is here, but there may be people who don't. Make ready is the process by which you work with the owners of utility poles to place your, in our case, fiber optic cable on the poles. There are safety concerns. The National Electronic Safety Code is one that's followed. So we have to make sure that we work with the owners of the poles. In this case, it's Eversource and Verizon. They own, the majority of the poles are joint owned. There are certain areas where one owns the pole and the other one doesn't, and they sort of geographically split them up in town. And make ready is the issue that is the single most difficult thing to deal with as far as building out and adding on to the poles. It's not just a GSET thing. Actually brought the FCC has multiple studies, boards, action committees that all deal with the fact that in the last few years, Make Ready has become ever more opaque, ever more expensive. It takes longer and longer. The solution of the FCC is what's called OTMR, which is One Touch Make Ready. But Massachusetts did not elect to approve that. One touch means we would go out and move everything. It's much faster. It is much more cost effective, but that is not something we have the option of in Massachusetts. So basically, they open up for comment over the years, and they really hear things like, the current Make Ready approach with its sequential Make Ready performed by different parties results in substantial delays, lack of predictability, higher cost, and reduced fiber network expansion. So when we first started, which was back in April of 2021, we put forward a proposal to then Mayor Wiedegardner and her staff about what it would take to expand, to use ARPA, American Reconstruction Plan Act money, to expand out into parts of Greenfield that we had not expanded out into. I sent you a timeline that really talked about how dynamic the situation was. At that time, there were still quite a few lawsuits that said that towns didn't have to do any of it, that they could go down the municipal space. There had been a few lawsuits that had been won primarily in Connecticut. So I say that because as we were starting, things just kept going back and forth. We thought it would be wise because we did not think in the long run after a while. In the beginning, we thought that maybe that would work. But in the end, we had to sign contracts, and it's a two-stage process. You have to sign a contract if you have any intention of being on polls, or in this case, we had to sign a contract because the previous group was already on polls and hadn't spoken with anybody. We did in that period do a little bit of building out, but we were talking to people the entire time. The overwhelming majority of it came from the first group. And once we signed those contracts and all the lawsuits had played themselves out and things had gone back and forth, we knew that we would have to then put in applications to, usually it's to go up on polls like in the North Build, but in the core of the city where the majority of the build out had taken place, it was a catch-up process. We knew that, Eversource knew that, Verizon knew that. What happened was also at that time, prices were going up and up and up for Make Ready. Again, if you are interested, there's lots of FCC documents about it. And in fact, it's still happening. We spoke with Senator Markey's office, who said, "What's your biggest problem?" We said, "Make Ready." He said, "We've contacted pretty much every MLP in the state, and they all said that Make Ready is too expensive. It takes too long. There's no local control over the process. And there's no point at which you can get a truly clear estimate of what costs would be." So in the beginning, we did not have ARPA money designated for paying Make Ready. But as we moved along in the process, and that was literally the very first communication we had, I see you have the potential ARPA grant. That was literally the first communication we had with the city about it. So at that point, we did not have money set for Make Ready. It became apparent fairly quickly after that Make Ready was going to be an issue that we had to deal with, and that we would have to deal with the Make Ready that came from the large build out the first group gave. And that was going to be a lot more money than we had originally anticipated. So we had $300,000, $305,051 allocated and encumbered by Mayor Wiedegartner to deal with make ready for what we call legacy make ready, which is make ready that was left over. I want to stress that I said it was a two-part process. So you have to sign the contracts to be on the polls at all. You have to put in applications to either make ready to remain on the polls, or you have to get off the polls. So there's the option that you can do the make ready and spend the money, or you can get off the polls and not spend money. That's the way the process works. ARPA was a big chunk of our solution, not all, but quite a bit of it. And now that that money has been taken, we have to find another way to address the capital need of addressing make ready. So since we don't believe that money will be available to us, we have to talk about a bond. We likely would have come to talk to you, not likely, we would have come to talk to you about a bond, but primarily next year, because this year we had thought we would be covered by ARPA. And frankly, we just never planned for that money to be taken away this late in the process. So it left us with some real issues to solve. A bond, again, for people out there, is not the city giving GSET money. A bond is authorization from the council for GSET to go get a loan that GSET pays for. It is not the city transferring money to GSET. It is not taxpayers paying for it. GSET has many bonds that we have done over the years that we pay for it out of our revenue. Doesn't affect the tax rate. There are bonds that the city takes, and those would affect the tax rate. And there are bonds that other enterprise funds take that would not affect the tax rate because they're paid by the revenue. Sometimes they're called revenue bonds that are paid for by the revenues for sewer and water, for example. At the end of this year, we'll be retiring 3 bonds that we've been paying off at an accelerated rate. So in a city, also in the private sector, you take a loan like that because you have a large one-time capital expense that you need to spread out over time. And that is something that's why there's a library. That cost can be spread out over time. It's why multiple sewer and water projects happen. We're paying off bonds for other things that we had to pay off over time. It is the standard way to address long-term capital needs. There is not, without it, there wouldn't be a library. I mean, anyone who has a mortgage knows if you have to pay for everything up front, that's not going to work in a lot of cases. And for anything that's an investment, particularly an infrastructure investment, you need to be able to take that expense and spread it over time. So what we will be doing is we have to determine the timing of it, because having lost that money, it's tough for us to wait until next year and go through the normal capital bond process.
Interrupt you real quick.
Sure.
Question. How much is the bond?
Well, it's 300,000 more than it would have been, because that is something we have to add in. We were talking about $450,000 bond. Now we're talking about a $750,000, $450,000 to $500,000, $750,000 to $800,000. So it's about 60% bigger than it would have been before the ARPA was removed. That is something we can certainly handle. As I said, we are retiring 3 bonds next year, and our overall bond payments will drop by over $100,000 a year, roughly 120. That figure is close, but not exact. $120,000. That still means we're still paying down the initial $5 million bond and a few other smaller bonds that we've taken. But again, we've had multiple bonds over the years. That's never really been an issue. The issue is, can we pay for a bond like that? And she said certainly can. So at this point, what I wanted to come here for is to say, if that ARPA money is not going to be there, and after months of talking about it, that the money isn't there. And there's money left for the North build. I will say to you what I've said to the mayor, that without handling the legacy make ready, the North build in some ways is moot, because if we have to either pay bills that we then can't pay, we have to get off the polls. And if we get off the polls in the core, there will be no GSET in the North build. If we have to get off polls, there just won't be GSET forever. Because at that point, you either pay the bill or you get off the polls. So I think our concern is that the bond request is going to have to be really significantly bigger than it would have been before. And we need to get to the point where we have enough comfort that that is something that would be supported for us to be able to move forward. We'll move forward, work with the mayor on the North build. It's a difficult process, but we will continue to do it because we know people want it. And yes, go ahead.
I didn't want to interrupt your.
No, you're,
But
that's fine.
just so I'm clear on this. There was a unclear process for licensing the polls initially. So when GSA was first formed, the process was unclear. The city acted as if it was effectively a free service they were able to do because there was this municipal space. I'm looking at your timeline sometime in 2019, roughly. That's when it started to become clear, or at least you started negotiating.
It literally went through 20. I mean, these things take a long time because there are multiple lawsuits.
Okay. And so you signed the toll agreements with Verizon and Eversource. They're all signed by 2021. The ARPA money was issued out to the city in 2021 as well. Is that right? Yes. Okay. And so in the initial request for ARPA funding, there was no mention of the licensing fees.
Because at that point, it wasn't really clear still. That's why, like I said, it's a two-stage process. I'm happy to answer it. Let me just answer him first, please. At that point, you have to sign the initial overarching contract. If we hadn't signed that, we would have had to get off the polls immediately.
And that's basic.
So the make ready process doesn't start until you put applications in. We didn't put applications in until after there was ARPA money.
And then I guess the last clarifying question I have, and so the former mayor allocated roughly what, $800,000? Is that
No,
the 600?
former mayor allocated $1,085,000.
$185,000. And so some of that ARPA money, 320,000, went towards the licensing, the make ready of the places where there were already equipment up.
That was what the intention was. That was why it was allocated and encumbered for that purpose.
Okay. And this is what some folks in the community refer to as an in-build versus outbuilding. And
Yeah, I don't know quite where that came from. In-build is not a real term.
or build in, I think is also how I've heard it referred to.
That you may have. It really is it's all a make ready.
Okay.
So I don't know where that's not a term we use.
And the explanation for that is when you were doing the process of the build out, at the same time, the licensing issue became clear to you folks. And so you took the ARPA money, some of it, and used it on the polls that already existed.
Right, because
That's basically-
it was at that point a choice between don't do it and just kind of hope everything would work out, which is not a responsible thing to do. Or say, all right, so some of this that we originally had hoped that would go to other things now have to go to this. It's a big pivot that had to happen because of the way the municipal space versus comm space is what it's called, the communication space worked out. There were years where most of the lawsuits, particularly there was a really important one in Connecticut where they ended up winning and the legislator said, nope, you can do anything you want in the municipal space. And then other people like large telecom companies, large cable companies came back and started an entire new round of lawsuits and ultimately prevailed. So as far as that's concerned, no, we did not have the ability to know when we very first started how that was all going to play out. It's a big, long project over time. I've been a manager for 30 plus years in both the private sector and the public sector. When you have projects like that, things are going to happen. Things are going to change. It is the norm rather than the exception. And you have to pivot and you have to be able to do what you can to make sure that you can continue on when outside conditions change and outside requirements change. That's what we did. So we did communicate that to the mayor. In the end, she decided that she wanted to take that money anyway. And she is the administrator of the grant. We don't agree, but that's where we are. Here we are now. So at that point, if that's where we are, then we have to figure out, okay, what can we do to responsibly move forward? Because things have now just, again, changed quite a bit for us. There's 60% more burden on us to address than we had before. And the time frame that we thought would be covered by that money, which would give us time, because we hadn't planned on coming to a bond until this bond cycle coming up. In fact, we just got the initial forms for it. But now, since the money was taken, we have to then figure out how to cover that period. And then we have to figure out not just a bond, but a much bigger bond than we had originally wanted to take, because that money is now gone. And we honestly never, ever planned for that money to vanish this late in the process. We just didn't think that was something that would happen. And it did. So at a certain level, it doesn't matter. Here we are now. Now we don't have this money. We still have these liabilities. If we want to stay on the polls, we want to produce the revenue that will pay for the bonds we have, that will pay for the new bond, then we need the ability to spread that capital out over time, like we have many times before, like sewer and water have many times before, like the city is in a slightly different way, because city bonds like that do impact taxpayers, like the city does for big buildings. It's literally the only way it happens in municipalities. So we're saying we need to use that process that we've used before. And our concern is that since now that has to be a much bigger bond, it's a bigger deal, right? A bond at the level we were talking about is not that unusual a thing. If we have to add 60% to the request, that is a bigger deal. And we want it to be transparent. We've spent a year almost answering every question everybody's had in any venue they wanted to ask it. We've been as transparent as we could be. We've provided the mayor with every single document, every single transaction that GSET made, and showed her that everything we pay comes through accounting. There's no payment for anything that GSET does that the city can't see and sees immediately. So we thought we should go to talk to people about this, because we have, since I've been here at least, worked really hard to make sure. We started talking with the mayor about this. We actually talked about it in a meeting on February 2nd, where the chair of the GSET Board of Commissioners, the mayor, and her previous chief of staff, Keith Barnacle, we talked about it then. We talked about it again in March. I sent you this email. I don't know if you've all had a chance to read it, where we talked about it. I frankly said I was kind of concerned with the mayor saying that she thought that money was just sitting around. She also told me she needed $1.5 million for the new budget. And I admit that I left that meeting thinking, uh-oh, what does that mean? Could have meant nothing. It could have been just me. But I left that meeting thinking that I was more concerned about ARPA money than I had been before. It turned out that that was correct. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So the South Greenfield and North Greenfield, none of these 52 streets have, she said,
Well, a bunch of the North Build will, when it's done. The delays in Make Ready have been really
Well-
difficult to overcome. Excuse
Yeah.
me, just let me
Yeah.
finish.
Okay.
What we did was we went out and got more grants. We went out because we really thought that our job is to figure out ways to pay for this that would take as much strain off of the city as possible. The first thing we did was go get federal grants. We have new federal grants for the GAP grant and a new federal grant for residential retrofit, which is connecting up the Weldon. I want to make a point about grants that I don't think, I know you understand it, but I don't think people understand. ARPA is different than any other grant. Any other grant. ARPA money can be spent on a wide variety of things. There is almost no reporting requirements for it. It can be spent on something called lost revenue. So ARPA can cover anything. It can cover anything from construction work in the town to it can pay people's salaries. All other grants are not like that at all. Grants normally are incredibly specific about where you can spend money and how you can spend money. We have worked with MBI, who gave us both of those grants because, and I will say, the GAP grant, we were the only MLP in the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts that qualified for a GAP grant. That we put a lot of work into it. They came, they looked at our operations, they've talked to us, and they were confident enough in how we have worked that they gave us a it's actually $767,000 grant to get out to areas that are almost exclusively, not entirely, but almost exclusively way out on the edge of town. Up in the north, we actually will go all the way out Wisdom Way so we can connect up city buildings. The transfer center is a building that we'll be connecting up. When you get grants like that, you can go through neighborhoods to get to those areas. So we will be expanding out coverage to people in Greenfield on the way to those areas. But we can't take that money and move it somewhere else and decide we want to spend it somewhere other than the grant.
I'm just curious to know why, unless I'm wrong, that you haven't even applied for licenses in the South.
Because we knew that money had to go for Make Ready. And when you apply for a license,
3 years ago, 3+ years ago.
because we knew we would have to use that money for Make Ready. The money for Make Ready has been sitting for years. That's why we did not think it would be taken. It was a settled thing. And if you don't have the money to pay for the Make Ready work for a license, it's not a good idea to apply for that. Because at that point, however long and frustrating the clock is, the clock does start. And you are either then faced with a bill you can't pay, or you have to get off the polls. So yes, when we had to repurpose money to address the legacy Make Ready issue, it meant that some places we thought we could get to, we would not be able to get to. It was the only responsible thing we could do because we cannot say that we would go to places when we don't. You can't even do that in Massachusetts. You have to have a source of funds. It's really tough for us to have a source of funds and have it be taken away, because then we have to either figure out a bond as a way to replace that source of funds, or we have to get off those polls.
So can I ask a little bit of a clarifying question on this?
Sure.
Because I know the word legacy gets thrown in there. How is that different than any other Make Ready? But seeing the proposal from 21, it was, I'm assuming this was sent to, all right, let me back that up. I'm seeing that the contracts were signed, at least with Eversource, in 2020. So that would have been before knowing any ARPA money was going to exist because it hadn't even been a thing yet.
Right.
So I guess multiple part here. How is that plan to be paid for if we're signing into it? As you just said, when you sign into a contract, you have to have the funding to be able to do it.
No, when you put the application in, you have to have the money.
Right. Okay.
That's not the same.
All right. But so what back then, the application would have already had to go through if you signed a contract.
No. And this is the part, if I
Yeah, sure.
you have more, let me know.
No. I'm just trying to figure out
The
because
contract,
if certain if the agreement with Eversource was to utilize this many poles, and you have to follow up on that and be able to do that, or they're gonna tell you, get off the poles. If we didn't know we had the funding to do all of those at the time, is that just a bad faith negotiation, or is that?
No.
I'm just, it seems weird to enter into a contract. I'm just going by the timeline we got. And it says a contract was signed in 2020
Right.
with Eversource.
So here's how this works.
Yep.
You have to sign a contract that says you will take part in the process to give them applications and go through the make ready process to get on the polls. It doesn't obligate you to spend any money. It says if you want to be on our polls at all, you have to have a master agreement in place.
Okay.
If we had not done that back then, we would have had to get off the polls.
Okay.
We didn't, that's why there's a gap between when we signed the first one, when we signed the second one, and when the applications came in.
Okay.
When you put an application in for a certain, and that's not us, that's just how they do it.
Sure.
When you put an application in, you are saying that you would follow through and either do the make ready work and pay or get off the polls. For most people, getting off the polls isn't an issue because they weren't on the polls in the first place.
Right.
Since so many streets had fiber up and radios up to when I got there, when we got here, then it was different. We had to go back to them and go, I know they didn't talk to you about this. We are talking to you about this.
Sure.
And we have to take care of this. At that point, costs for make ready were quite a bit smaller.
Sure.
They've been growing. It's really a problem,
I'll get rid of it.
like more than everything, because the difference is they don't pay us anything to be on their private poles that are in our public right of way. But through a lot of lobbying and regulatory capture, they have managed to push through rules that say we don't really have any rights. We have to do what they say. And they do that. They got the FCC to preempt. They got states to say, nope, we're going to follow the FCC's guidelines. Massachusetts basically said, no, we're going to do our own. And then straight down the line approved everything the FCC said. So it puts people in a difficult position. And as more and more MLPs have come online, it's not really a surprise that it's gotten more and more difficult as it becomes more of a threat to legacy people. So at that point, where we were, we thought we're going to be able to do this. That's why nothing happened in the North Build until we figured beyond the legacy, we had enough money left in the ARPA to do that. They happened at the same time. So I understand the difference. We talked in July. I don't think you were there, but the mayor and a bunch of councilors showed up in July. You were there, Sir John, you were there. And we answered this question then too, because Councilor Minas asked the same question. We said, I know there's two things you have to do.
Right.
The first master contract is you can't even get on the playing field
Right.
unless you sign that. But the actual obligations to either do the make ready or get off the pole come via applications for each pole. Because the master contract says you'll follow this process. It doesn't say we are licensing you for this many poles. That happens during application.
So what would the difference have been other than just slower build out? Hypothetically speaking, if there was no ARPA money, it would have just been.
If there had been no ARPA money, we would have had to come back and say, this legacy build out is still there. Because if we hadn't ever done anything, if we were all gone, the legacy would still be there. And at that time, we were having no trouble getting any kind of a bond. Well, so.
What I mean is, there's no, in signing this agreement before they tell you to get off the rest of the polls. there's no timeline involved in that agreement. It's just saying you're going to do this as you can, essentially.
When you get to a certain area and put in an application,
Right,
I mean, there are timelines for them to complete work. They don't even come close.
right, sure.
But
What if you were to, I'm just hypothetically speaking again, if we were to have not got any ARPA money and the applications would obviously be rolling out much slower rate because
you wouldn't put any in.
you wouldn't put any until you had
No.
money to do
We
it.
had the,
Right.
yeah, and that would
So
have
it would have
happened
just
from a bond.
stalled for a while
Mhm.
until you got a bond or enough
Mhm.
revenue generated.
Mhm. Yep.
Then you could have applied for them. So essentially, this just expedited the process by having ARPA funding available.
Yeah, and we thought it's much better
Right.
if we're using federal grant money. Then it's because for us, it goes federal grant money, ratepayers. And then unfortunately, if everything went away, because if GSEC goes away, that doesn't mean the bonds do.
Right.
And if we don't have any revenue, then the city will pay for those bonds because that's how it works.
So
That's the last thing
I'm sorry.
anybody wants. So,
John, I just have a few questions and,
Sure.
you know, I love GSET, so I'm a customer, been happy since the beginning. Had the sign in my yard when you guys made
thank
us
you. I
do that.
appreciate that.
We didn't
did.
make you, you
I
got
know.
$5 off.
Yeah, we were kind of pushy about it too.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. So just so I'm understanding, when you did your original budget, the licenses weren't included because you didn't know that that needed to happen because of the landscape
Yeah,
changing.
we still thought there was an excellent
Okay.
chance that we would be able to say, because originally the municipal space, which is exactly the same space as the comm space, was open. And then the pole owner said, well, wait a minute now, but you can't offer any services out of there. You could just do fire. You could just do this. And they were challenged regularly. And during that process, states were saying, no, we can. You're on our right of way. We're supposed to have this space and we should be able to offer services. And
So-
for a while, it looked like we could, and then
Just that helps because I was just like, is network
Mhm.
access mean licenses? So. just
Right, no,
looking
I hear
through.
you.
So you guys have provided a lot of information and I think what I've had trouble about, it's like, it's something here, something there, and I'm trying to consolidate it.
Sure.
Honestly,
sure.
so I'm trying to figure out, you know, out of the original expenditures you were looking for in the original budget, how does that line up with what's been spent? And you might not be able to tell me that right here, so that's fine.
Do you
but-
mean ARPA budget or?
Yeah, the ARPA budget, because I'm
We
just
can
trying to
give you-
figure out the apples and
Sure.
oranges of what's happened
Right.
and what shifted, because I think that's what we're all trying to figure out. We're not thinking that you're like running away with the money, right? It's just like the circumstances have
No, I
changed and we
understand.
want to make sure that we understand how it's being applied
Of course.
and how, based on those changes. And then, you know, in your most recent email, it looks like you've used $300,000 for licenses and then 95,000 for support purchases is what your email, and I wasn't sure what
Sure.
support purchases were.
We can give you close, but
Okay.
not exact. No, I
That's okay.
don't know the exact number.
I'm just trying to get the
But I understand,
ballpark, so I
but
understand like what's been
I'm-
spent, what's needed, and then
Sure.
we've got the
And
amount that you want back.
right. And then, okay, so I can do that for you. In the most basic sense, we've spent about $600,000 on surveys, on buying equipment, which is the overwhelming portion of that.
Okay.
That's everything from fiber optic to, if you go up onto Severn Street, you will see a building
Okay.
that we had to buy and put in place because part of the way service is delivered is you have to have what are called local convergence points to make the network work.
So that was.
So
your-
that left a little over $400,000.
So
Okay.
originally you thought that was gonna be like 275, if I'm,
We did not think,
or it could.
I'm putting together several things from the initial proposal.
Yeah, yeah.
in the end, and remember, we bought a bunch of stuff at once because in the middle of all this COVID happened and everybody's supply lines were completely screwed up. And I will tell you, everything we buy
Well, it makes
now.
sense. It was cheaper then. So.
Yeah, right, so we
Yeah,
bought, right,
it
so we
was.
bought it before, that's what we did. We actually bought it because we were worried we weren't even gonna be able to get it, so.
I get it.
So in the end, that left us about $400,000. About 100 and some was a little over $400,000, about 100 and some would be for the north build, even though during that time, Make Ready has continued to go up.
Mhm.
So it's probably going to be a little more than that. And 300 was what we put aside and it was allocated to us by the former mayor and it was encumbered in late 2023, which is our way of saying, wait, now we have things, the applications we want to pay this
Right.
against.
And we know it needs to be encumbered by or by.
December 31st.
And it was. And now that that money has been taken back, we're in the position where we said we would do some of this work because we thought we had those funds and now we don't.
Okay.
Okay, so that doesn't mean we weren't going to come back and say we need a bond as we go along. We would, but bonding is not some crazy thing. Bonding is how all of this works, and it's how generally everybody addresses capital needs.
So it sounds like at the end of the day, if I'm recapping right, you needed to shift to be able to get back to the core because of the legacy
Mhm.
issues.
Mhm.
And so you ARPA for some of that.
Mhm.
And then Northfield has gotten more expensive too. So those
Yes,
$4,
Yes.
we're going to cover it.
although Councilor Master Tatar was right. To make that pivot, we can't do some of the things we originally said we were going to do. That's true.
So
Thank you.
I'm just looking at this ARPA spreadsheet, right? And
The what? I'm
What
not
ARPA spreadsheet is
the
that?
budget detail, this came from, I believe, the mayor.
I
Can we
don't,
see
I
that?
don't have that. Can we see that? You weren't given.
Yeah,
I think this is
So-
all of her expenditures on ARPA.
so, wait,
Sure. Thanks.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, this is the previous mayor as well.
Oh, I see.
This is all of ARPA.
Right.
This is all of ARPA's, not just
Oh,
ours.
not just,
I see.
I see.
let me just ask the question here. Okay, as of September 30th, there's 800,000, this is including past administration.
No. No, if it
No, no.
wasn't September 30th, the mayor took the money on August 6th.
Let me finish,
Pardon me.
let me finish, please.
Okay.
The budget is 800,000. And so she hasn't taken everything back. My question is, if you took the 729.90, the 729,949 previous budget, and apparently you have encumbrances coming to you for 12,000 and change. So, and I'm not sure what this remaining unspent money is.
That'd be the difference between the year-to-date actual and encumbrances.
Okay, so my point is, you're saying that in order to make this happen, you need for your bond an extra $400,000. There's only a difference.
$100,000. Sorry,
There's only a difference here of $200,000.
that's,
So let me answer that.
Yeah.
The 800,000 that is here was pulled from the life of the ARPA broadband, but there was a point where there was $385,000 put in, and this is not accounting for that.
right.
So the total of the broadband ARPA was $1,030,000 or $35.
It's either
35,000? Right.
1,035,000 or 1,085,000. It's 1,035,000.
Yeah,
So,
so this isn't actually the number that we should look at.
Right.
And we have more encumbered now than was on this list.
right,
So we encumbered for the conduit build for
That's
just under 10.
1,200,
No,
12,000?
no, this is what is left for the surveys for
Mhm.
Make Ready. So Make Ready has a process that we have to send the application to Verizon and then application to Eversource. And they go out and they do surveys and make sure that they actually know what's on the telephone poles and come
Mhm.
back. Verizon will come back and they send a contractor. So they actually bill us additional charges after that contractor has been sent out. And that's what the additional $12,870 is for.
Mhm.
That's for the remaining surveys that haven't come back in from Verizon.
And the remaining unspent, is that, is there a plan for that?
So
The 100.
yeah, the 162, the mayor has said that 56,000 will be put in. It is not in that ARPA broadband account right now. So I think that that is part of that 162. That's
Right.
actually part of the 305,000
Right.
that she said she would return 56. This number does not show in my ARPA account at this
Right.
point.
It actually is pretty simple. On August 8th, there's an email from the mayor to Angelica DeRoche, account that says, as discussed yesterday, please remove $305,051.02 encumbrance from GSET ARPA account. There will still be $106,875.59 in that account. That's not entirely accurate because there are encumbrances that move that out. She's totaling up everything, and that's not exactly right, but I understand what she's trying to do. And then Angelica wrote back and said, do you want me to remove the allocated ARPA money from GSET so the remainder is only $106,875.59? And the mayor responds, yes. So the mayor took $305,051.02. I think it actually worked out to be 6 cents. And then these budget numbers are after that. So they're not really reflective of what the true baseline state was.
After and including that 56 grand you're talking about.
Right, exactly.
Including that 56 grand. So when, after last month's meeting, she said, I'm increasing their budget. She's not increasing anything. She took money. She didn't increase money. She decided to return some of the money she took, although that hasn't actually happened yet. I believe her. She said so. I think she will. I have no problem with the mayor on the North Build, with the exception that we have spoken several times about how the legacy Make Ready affects the North Build. And I think she wants to think of them as completely separate things, and they're not. So that would be the one thing I would say. When the mayor got on in front of council and said, I support the North Build, I believe you. So my point is, that's not all that needs to happen. And to say that and to take the rest of the money still puts GSET in a very difficult position, because yes, some money was left for the North Build, but $305,000 was taken out of ARPA that we had plans for, that you go back to the memo that I sent to the mayor in March. And I said, wait a minute, all of that money is spoken for. She has since said she would return 56,000. I take her at her word. I believe her. But that still leaves over $250,000 that was taken, that we now have to find some other source of revenue to fill.
So it's not $400,000.
It never was 4. I
Okay.
said we'd increase it by 3. That's what
Okay.
I said. I said instead of 50 or 5.
That's 249.
Because it sounded like when you talked about the bond that you needed
What's that?
another.
Yes.
249 is what hasn't been returned.
Yeah, it's about 50,
Well, the other 56 has not been returned either, but will be returned.
but will be.
Okay, but it's,
Yeah.
so it's not, even though it's in this budget, reflected, it hasn't necessarily made its way over.
Right.
Right. But I'm confident.
So as GSET pivots
Mhm.
and you're asking, ask for a bigger bond, are you comfortable with the revenue you have right now to keep the store
Yeah.
on and everything?
Yeah.
And you said there'd be some things are gonna fall off now. What kind of things are you gonna have to change?
They already did. I was trying to respond to Councilor Master Tataro's question about the South and streets that we wouldn't be on. They already did. when we made the decision to move the 300,000, we didn't encumber it immediately. But when we made that decision, we knew that we couldn't follow through on everything we had originally.
So the South's gone forever?
No.
Okay.
So we actually will be in the black this year. Next year, our payments drop for all bonds that we have, because we still have several bonds that we're addressing, by about $120,000. That means we could handle a significantly large new bond. It means that ratepayers will pay it, so we won't put as much in retained earnings as we otherwise would have. And we'll do other things to help. We're going to raise rates. It's a competitive marketplace. You can be as mad at sewer or water as you want, but you still have to pay because there is no.
Well, I gotta say, I might interrupt you here, but I know that you guys, if a business is running by the skin of its teeth, which seems to be that right now, I mean, you say you're in the black somewhat. And I'm not trying to be a wise guy here, but you guys put in for your own raises, 4% raises over how long, how many years have you been doing that?
Well,
Again, if you got a business that's barely making it, and I ran a business, nothing compared to the size of this monetarily.
Mhm.
And if things were lean, I didn't give myself a raise.
Neither did I. You can go look back and see several years where I didn't give myself a raise at all. I gave them a raise and not me. You can see that in a couple of different years. We have been profitable. And what I really want to say, because I do want to keep everything respectful, I think that borders on not being respectful.
Well-
But what I will say is that don't confuse capital issues and operational issues. The problem comes when we're being told we have to figure out a way to cover what is normally handled by capital bonding and capital issues out of operations. You ran a business, I ran a business. I was successful for 30 years in the private sector before I came to work for the city. I know what I'm talking about. So if you go to businesses and say all of a sudden you're cut off from all access to capital, then they are screwed, because that's how it works, because nobody can pay cash up front for everything. That's why you wouldn't have a library without a bond. That's why half of the sewer and water projects in town wouldn't happen. That's why, unless you get a grant, sidewalks don't happen. So when you say you guys are barely making any money, that's not really true. What is true is we have been sustainable for years now. So coming at me about raises, I bet you didn't know that I didn't give myself a raise, but I didn't for several years. I did last year because we're making money. And by the way, I still make 25% less than the previous general manager did. He had 200 accounts and about $20,000 a month, $2,000 a month in revenue. We have 100 times that. We have close to $200,000 a month in revenue, and I still make less money than he did. That makes sense because he made a ridiculous salary for somebody at that point. I started at $77,000. I took only raises that were the raises that everybody else took. And in years when I didn't feel that it was right, I didn't want to make them pay for it, so I didn't take a raise. Okay? So we actually agree. I agree that when you are in a really tight stage, maybe you don't take a raise, but we're not operationally, because this is the first year that we don't have old debt to pay off. We paid off $89,000 of old retirement expenses last year. The first week I sat down, the then finance director, Elizabeth Braccia, said, "Don't shoot the messenger. You have $269,000 of retirement obligations that you have to figure out a way to pay." There were many operational debts that were left behind when I took over. We've paid them off. There was a much bigger capital debt that was left behind. And I could not take a raise forever and it wouldn't come close to paying it because capital and operations are two totally different things.
So I think it's also important to mention the idea of like an enterprise fund in the first place is very different than a private business.
Right,
And that you are supposed to break even every year,
right.
whether it's you have some retained earnings. We've seen it like certain years, like the fire department, they have their ambulance revolving fund that they can use to utilize towards some capital purchases if they have to. They don't like to, but sometimes, you gotta take from it. So I think that that's also important to note with the difference of something like sewer water GSET is it is not city funded in the same way. It pays for itself and that those rates that pay for that, you're not supposed to be running in the black, essentially. If you do, you're turning money back over, you're paying, or hopefully you can use it towards infrastructure at a certain point.
Right.
But again, the rates are set, at least for sewer and water, are set based on paying that amount, which levels out. It becomes zeros at the end of the day.
That ties in with a question I've been thinking for a little while. So as far as the ratepayer is concerned, if you did end up having to approach the city council for a larger bond, is that going to have an impact on the ratepayer as compared to a smaller bond with ARPA money?
Well, yes, because ARPA money is a grant and doesn't impact GSET's long-term bond payment schedule. If in fact it has to go on to GSET ratepayers, that's better than going on taxpayers. We don't love it, but I think we would all agree that that's better. But it will affect them long run. We're going to raise rates in January, which we hadn't been planning on doing because we have to figure out how to increase revenues now while we're still working to build out. I will just say the one thing I want to add is once the North build is done, we will have quite a few new customers up there. The only complaints we really ever get are how come I can't get it, right? They can't get it because we have a giant overhang of old capital debt that we have to deal with. In the last 6 years, we've cleared all the operational debt. We have to clear this capital debt. And after that, I think we need to have reserves in retained earnings just for a rainy day or if something unexpected happens. But I think of it, I have a friend who works in nonprofits, and in this way, we're a little like a nonprofit. And she said to me, your first job is to make $1. Your second job is you better not make $2 because you're supposed to run it right there because all benefits go to ratepayers. My job is actually created by the state. Right. I am not a department head. GSET is not a department of the city. I report to the Board of Commissioners. I work with you. I'm happy to work with the mayor, but it's very clearly spelled out what I am supposed to be paying attention to, what I have a statutory responsibility to, and it is to ratepayers. I think it is in ratepayers' benefit to accept a larger bond service obligation for the stability that it will bring and the continuity that will bring to GSET. We save people a lot of money. We're close to about $2 million a year in total that we save people. So if it goes up a little, it'll go up a little. Comcast is going to go up too. So we can afford to go up a little bit and we're going to have to. But unlike monopolies, and don't get me wrong, I think sewer and water are run wonderfully. Water in this town is an unbelievably good deal. And I think Marlo and his crew deserve a lot of credit for that. But you can be as mad as you want at water. You can't go get your water from Deerfield. We have competition. And I learned that when I was chair of the school committee. If you don't offer services that are competitive, parents walk. If we don't offer services that are competitive here, customers walk. We lose very few people because we do offer great services.
Sure.
I have a question for you, Chairman.
Sure.
When we originally, because I wasn't on the council and ARPA came through, many towns set up different processes. Was that ever discussed? I know it's pretty.
I wasn't here either, to be honest, when the ARPA money came through. However, I do know that it's 100% discretionary on the mayor.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the 11th hour, so you know, doesn't.
I mean, it's just like a lot of things, like we can, a lot of folks come to our meetings, not as many come to these meetings, but good to see a bigger turnout than normal. But a lot of people in the city, I think are people always hate when you use the word ignorant, but it's the right word. They don't know how the process works. So they think they come, I mean, you guys have all seen the emails where they're saying, can you give this money here? Can you move this money here? And they don't understand we don't move the money.
Right.
It all has to come from a financial order, and this is no different. The only difference with ARPA compared to our normal spending is it doesn't require our approval.
Right.
This is really tough. And
We can give suggestions, but
I worked in Springfield and they had a very open process where nonprofits and others, there was an RFP. And I've looked at the websites of a number of different cities and towns around the Commonwealth, and they're very clearly putting up what they've spent for ARPA and, the different buckets you talked about, John, like that you can spend it for. So
Mhm.
health, emergency infrastructure and things like that. And
this had a long leash. ARPA had a long.
yeah, no, and this
Many
is,
wishes.
it's,
Hey, you'll never see it again. You'll
No.
never see money that's as free as ARPA money. ever.
and we, again, we have to encumber it by
Right.
the end of December. So I'm not suggesting that we start putting rules on,
I believe it just has to be allocated, right?
Right.
Actually,
well, you just have to say how you're gonna do it,
Correct.
where it's going.
right?
Right.
I'm sorry?
And as of January 1st, that allocation cannot be rescinded.
Right.
I mean, that's the challenge even here tonight, John, GSAT,
You could say it out loud.
we can
because I
listen,
can't hear you.
but
It's
I know
okay.
the rules. I understand.
Encumber it?
It cannot just be planned for.
Is this different than the rest of the ARPA money?
No, this is yet all of the ARPA, the 5.5 million that was the original pot.
What I mean is this different municipality wise, because
No.
we have that in my work and it doesn't need to be encumbered. It just needs to be allocated by the end of the year and spent by the end of 2026.
It needs to be obligated.
That's the-
Obligated is what it
A
says in
different
ARPA.
term.
So,
Yeah.
Well,
and so,
my reading.
It's gonna be locked in, right?
right.
Yes, like in the form of a contract to do something.
Right.
So like a purchase order to finish some public work project. It really has to go through our PO system to know that's the encumbering part of saying, we're gonna do this, we have the numbers, we have the source, we know that. And at least to say that's what we're gonna spend it on by December 31st of this year.
So if you were
So
gonna,
then next year, you gotta do it.
so this seems very different than what I've dealt
I
with.
respectfully
Is that-
disagree.
Yeah,
It's obligated is what the ARPA says,
Right,
and
so
so it has to be
it's like a
obligated
capital
to a
project, you could-
project, but you don't know who you're
Yes.
going to actually pay.
Right.
Let us disagree.
it wouldn't go
because that's not
out to
how-
bid.
that's
Well,
not how
I think the important point here is by the end of this calendar year,
Mhm.
there has to be a plan for what to do. We can argue about obligated versus allocated and encumbered.
Because that's legal.
It is legal, but it's also very true that as the administrator of the grant, the mayor has pretty wide latitude.
And
So
that's also.
people argue about legal stuff all the time, Stella. My point is that by the end of this year, it needs to be clear what the mayor is planning on doing with that money. We're not operating under the assumption that she's going to return any more money. We've spent 8 months on this and we're still in the same place where we were.
maybe.
Michael,
Should
Mayor
we
would like to speak.
ask- Well, should we ask the mayor? Oh, or-
Yeah, you can come out if you want. You can come back.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I'm
I
almost-
have that chair.
Yeah.
Sure. It's not just my
Oh, I
favorite
can
chair,
smell
it's like that. Stella, do you want to come up too?
Other chair over here.
So,
It's the other ground if you want this.
Or you want this chair?
yeah, he's up. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just don't want to be on the.
Turn the music on.
We're giving up.
I had a few things while I was sitting over there that was said about how things were done, so I just wanted to explain from my perspective, the things that I was thinking about, okay? I think I think you both know, I think GSA's a fabulous service and I wish I had it. I'm not, I wish that so many more people have it. I wish that everybody in the north end of town and apartment buildings and in places with all the underground wires and conduits, that those streets all had it, like
So do we?
Wayland and East and Fargo and Lamp-Black. I'm hoping that, you know, they could all have this because it's a huge savings to those people.
Yes.
So I just wanted to say, I wanted to give an overview of my concerns. And I'm going to start with the ARPA grant and then go on to the day-to-day. I'm responsible for watching over the grant money and making sure that it's used for its intended purpose and that the goals are accomplished. As other people said, the proposal for the ARPA, and I understand you talking about it changing, was specifically for 2 sections of build out. And it included 52 streets. 2/3 of that money approximately is spent. It was spent on good things. Purchasing fiber and needed materials for the build out, 7 street hut, aerial surveys. 4 of the licenses, 4 of 22 licenses. 3 of them in the north end of town and 1 Deerfield Street, Hope Street and Meridian, where things were already hanging. Those 4 licenses are a little over $200,000. And the one on Deerfield Street, people already had the services. It's also been used to pay some legal expenses, fuel bills, car repair, rent for the office, and a condenser fan motor. And I just want to explain, I'm the person that has to sign off on things, okay? So there were things that came, they were all new to me, being a mayor, but the bill schedules I take them seriously because what I read was that it was going to be for broadband expansions. And this actually was the last one that I signed off on. It was for $5,000. It was for Streetwave. Now, mind you, I'm not the IT person, so we all know this. I'd be looking things up. Streetwave, that sounded like IT. Cartelli Ford for 2,000 and the MCOR services, which was for the mini split HVAC unit on the side of Town Hall. It was after that I actually sent a letter saying that we needed to separate that because it didn't appear to me, and I do understand what you're saying. It didn't appear to me that we were using it for things that it was intended or build out or licenses. Since then, you know, by the end, I had 2 more bill schedules that I was asked to sign that I actually refused to sign. One was for, they were for a total of $40,000. One was for 3 months of Amazon Web Services. That was a total of about $7,000. Another one was for $16,000 for something that was an operating expense. It didn't appear to me to have anything to do with licenses. Or it was something that you had a part of your operational the year before. You spent $15,560 on that. So I did not sign that. And yes, I did freeze that. But I'm going to go on to the things that I'm concerned about because we touched on a lot of them. And I think that we really agree on many of the things. So those $40,000 worth of things, they were bills that had already been paid, and they had been paid like some of them last August of 23. And I was supposed to sign for reimbursement from ARPA, and I did not because it didn't appear to me that was the original intended purpose. Currently, as you've said, there are no applications for the South build that was in there, and we have 17 of the 18 license applications left, each of which I figure will cost approximately $55,000 a piece because I have 4. And I can tell you what each one of the 4 was, and they're not with the true up costs and everything. One of the licenses was 52, one was 46, One was 44,000, these are thousands. And the other one was for $37,000. And those don't include, they're not finished yet. So I'm concerned that just getting that done, where folks already have service, will cost about $1 million, because that's how much 18 times $50,000 is. And that's a huge liability for the city. We're talking about a legacy, and I understand why it's needed. But I think we actually have to talk about the facts and what this is going to cost. If this is the will of everyone, I sent out the whole ARPA thing, and I'm sorry, that was actually in the packet that went out to,
That's okay.
city councilors. I apologize that you didn't have it too, because I wanted you to see the judgments that I have to make. There are things on the, there are things for ARPA that keep happening. Things in the city that keep happening. The Mill Street Dam, there's emergency repairs that are needed. I thought about using some of it, and you're right. I put this out so that everybody could understand. The substation downtown, to fix that up, is going to be probably $75,000, and I don't have a funding source for that or the Mill Street Dam repairs. There's very unsafe sidewalks from the Weldon to the downtown by the post office especially. That is something that is also very much needed and would benefit all taxpayers. So I am concerned when we keep calling it a legacy. It's not like we inherited something. We did actually inherit it,
Yeah,
but it's
it
a
is.
liability.
Exactly
It's a
that.
liability. And I think that we have to say that so that we're talking about what this is actually going to cost. And then together, I don't enjoy making these huge decisions. It's very weighty to have to decide which thing goes to which. But secondly, I was listening and I have listened when we're talking about that the ratepayers are paying for all of the operational expenses. The Greenfield taxpayers are indeed subsidizing GSET. And I'm just watching out for those taxpayers. Taxpayers have paid the fringe, which is health insurance, Medicare, and workman's comp for fiscal year 23 and 24. And John, when you brought your budget to me this year, it had the taxpayers paying for the fringe benefits for fiscal year 25. And I actually refused to have the city cover that for another year. But I'm just going to finish because I didn't interrupt you. Okay.
Right.
I want you to understand that this year, the fringe was $143,000 for those fringe benefits, which we put back into their budget. And they have a tight budget. So I understand that. But for the prior 2 years, that means that the city paid for $286,000 approximately for those personnel benefits. Additionally, $4,800 has been budgeted every year to GSET to pay for their share of the audit, but we've never subtracted that. So that is a total of $24,000. They are not paying for any of their insurance on the 3 huts or any of the fiber or equipment that they purchased. The city is paying for that. Most importantly, I sent this to you in your packet, on page 26 of your packet. It talks about the deficit that for the first 3 years, and I understand this is a blossoming business, but the first year the deficit was 79,000, the next year 288,000, and in fiscal year 22, 310,000. So the total cost that came out of general fund was 678,000. This was not paid for by GSET subscribers, but by the taxpayers who actually deserve to know the truth about this. It's a fabulous service. Like I said, I want everybody to have it, but the deliverables on this thing were not delivered. And but I understand that we have to do that. I understand that those licenses need to be done. And I thought, I've asked in the past, what was going to be the whole cost of this? So I figure those 18 more licenses, figuring what the first 4 have been, because history usually repeats itself, but they're going to be about that. And we said that things have gone up. then we have to figure out what the cost for doing the south build would be. That's another, but you've gotten some grant money, so that's a good thing. But I have concerns, and I have concerns that we express it, you know, the way it's happening. And if the consents, anyways, I wanted you to speak.
So I'd like to be able to respond.
Well, that's fine, but I just wanted
Well,
Stella to have
why
a
don't we
chance
ask the
to.
chair
Okay.
what he would like.
Yeah, if you want to give a quick response, John, and then
Sure.
we'll move over.
I just made a list. Reclassing is common. We've done it every year since we've been here. So pointing that out as somehow odd is I don't believe correct. You talked about MCOR, you talked about money for trucks. This is the point I've been making. The whole network is connected. If you don't have a truck that works, you can't do the maintenance to keep it up and ready. So the idea that these were expenses that you didn't feel were appropriate is not something we talked about. There was no back and forth. You just said no. So as for the grant, because your oversight is for the grant, right? Oversight for GSEC comes from the GSEC Board of Commissioners. As for the grant, if you take that money, it's our job to tell people what the consequences of that would be. And that's what we're doing here tonight. As far as indirects, with all due respect, Mayor, we offered to pay this year a year earlier than the agreement that predated you coming into office. We made that agreement with the prior Chief Financial Officer Liz Gilman and Mayor Wiedegartner because there were mistakes that were made on the city side that caused our bond payments to go up by over $100,000 for 3 years. They offered, I have Liz's email that says what we're going to do is not charge indirects. We spoke with them. We felt we could do it this year, the one we're in right now, which is the third and final year. And we offered, you didn't refuse and put it back. We offered you that. $4,800 budgeted for the audit. We put it in every year. If you don't take it out, then you don't take it out. That's not our issue. Insurance must be bought through the city. We have actually paid for additional insurance that we've added in and are fine with that as well. Deficit, the first going back, it was common knowledge. The chair of the Board of Commissioners said it for years and years and years. It would take 5 years for GSET to get to profitability. We did it in 5 years. Since then, we have operated sustainably. We try to make $1 and not $2, so we don't have a huge amount left. But every one of those points, there is an excellent reason behind it. And part of what frustrates us is our communication is so poor that you make these decisions and say, I have no choice. I get it, Mayor. I understand that those are weighty decisions. I believe you. But when you make those decisions, they have consequences. There are consequences for GSET from your decision, and it's our job to lay them out. When you say people need to hear the truth, they have heard the truth. That's the one thing you said that actually kind of upsets me.
Sorry.
Because it's okay. I understand where you're coming from. I believe you're sincere about this. I don't think you're bad. I just think our communication needs to be a whole lot better. So we have been incredibly transparent. We gave you literally every piece of paper we could find. We had meetings where we said to ourselves, what else can we give to the mayor? You have asked us questions for months in writing, and we answered them. You guys came to a meeting in July, and we threw out the agenda and spent 2.5 hours answering questions because we think it's fine. I said at the last, I had to speak in public comment, but I said at the last meeting, we think it's fine you ask questions. These questions have to go somewhere. We've never really had a definition of what a successful answer to all the mayor's questions would be. That's not because I think the mayor is trying to be tricky. It's just that here we are months later and we hear the same thing. I have more questions. Well, okay, let's ask them, but they have to be moving towards resolution. And we haven't had any movement towards resolution at all. So you can go on, Stella, please, but I heard 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things from the mayor. And with all due respect, I don't agree on any of them. I think those issues were part of an overall connected network. And if we, and we at no point did you come and talk to us about this? You just said no. So
Can I just ask a question and maybe turn down the heat because I see fingers pointed at each other and I don't think this is supposed to be kind of got you.
yes, I don't either.
Mayor, I just want to ask, what do you need to be comfortable to return money to GSED?
That is a good question. And I like to read the room on this. I have concerns about the liability if this is before Ways and Means with all of the ARPA expenditures, some of the things that are needed. If I understand John and Fern's position on this, I have concerns because we didn't do what we said we were going to do. We didn't deliver on the promises, the timelines, and the story appeared to me to keep changing. And, but if the will of the group is for the last 200,000 to go for 4 licenses, I can agree to that. There's $200,000 more that we're talking about, or $235,000. I just think it needs to be very much out in the open what is going to happen and what is not going to happen. You seem to be working very hard at getting the north end of town done. I have committed funds to get that done. I would prefer that we were building out to the south end of town because that's what was promised in it. But if that is not what can be done next, I can hear that and understand. I have some concerns about the economic viability, but it will help a lot having the new customers in the North Build. And I think since I actually kind of held tight on this, that we all will work, it appeared to me that a lot of effort was made to get the North Build started, completed, not started. It had been started prior to that, so I don't want to misspeak.
Can I just make a comment?
Mhm.
So I know that I have put together an estimate for the Make Ready. I know John has put one together and I know you've put one together. And the North Build was expensive. A lot of those poles were old, needed to be replaced.
Yeah.
They were 35 feet. Now they do 40 and 45 feet. But as you go around town, you can see that Eversource has done a great job of replacing a lot of poles. So I don't have the answer to how much all of this Make Ready will cost because we don't have the information from the pole owners. But I can tell you that in town, I expect it to be less than it was on the north. And the funds were encumbered for Eversource and Verizon. And I think obviously we can commit that those funds will be used for Make Ready. So if that is the goal here, is to continue on with the North Build and to pay legacy.
Mhm.
And I know we all want to be in the South. Some grant funds will help us get to some of those places. But it will take time, we'll have to pay the legacy, we'll have to pay the bond back, we'll have to maybe ask for another bond or get retained earnings to pay for that. But without the legacy being paid, there is no option of building out any further.
And maybe we just haven't explained that well. We've tried to, but the legacy Make Ready has to be done or nothing else matters. Because if we have to take the core of the city offline, GSET's done. So when it's true, the initial proposal said we would do things that we weren't able to do as things developed. I don't see how we could have perfectly foreseen everything. So I understand where you're coming from. And if that's how you feel about it, that's how you feel about it. I do think we've been pretty clear about why we made the change and what needs to happen. And I do think, we can talk some other time about your concerns about viability. Because I respectfully disagree. But what I would say is what we're here to talk, what I came to talk about, what I wrote to you, Mr. Chair, and everyone else who wanted to talk about ARPA and bond. And I'm not sure how going back to the first several years of GSET is particularly useful at this point. I think it was something that people had talked about pretty openly. So here we are now.
Yes, may I?
Of course.
So here we are now. And as I said, the last things that I were asked to sign. So if we were bill schedules for things that were operational. So if that were to go forward, would that strictly be for Verizon and Eversource and no more? Would you be willing to commit that I would not receive any more bill schedules for things that like Amazon Web Services, which is a monthly expense?
So you wrote to me, I'm writing today to request that any GSET bill schedules that fall under the American Rescue Plan Act be submitted separately from operational bills schedules and signed off directly by the mayor. You actually have to sign up anyway. And I wrote back, thanks for your letter. If you would prefer to have ARPA related bills sent to you directly and not via accounting, then we are happy to do that. If you would like, I can also include a short narrative explaining the ARPA justification for each item. If that is not sufficient, then I am always available to you to answer any questions you might have. I can absolutely commit to you that. The concern I have is that some of the things that you mentioned are things that directly bear upon our ability to build out. If we can't keep the point of presence cool, then it doesn't matter because there's different aspects of the network. There's the distribution, there's the aggregation layer, the distribution layer, the core, all of those things. When you add in the North Build, a fair amount of work has to be done right here to make it work. So yes, the spirit of what you're asking, absolutely, I can commit to that. But I do want to say that there are going to be times when a little bit more detailed explanation is required, and we're happy to provide that to you.
Okay, and I just would like to explain that this was wonderful what Fern put together. It was fabulous, and I've read it all 3 times. But what actually the city was receiving, just so everyone understands, would be an Eversource bill, and it would say $27,000 for sundry, with no other documentation with it. That was what I had when I asked for it here. When I asked for it from you, because we could not see where any of the work was being done, like what was actually happening to that, then you put something together and it was wonderful because it had the street name, so you could actually see where things were happening. But if I'm not questioning those things, I'm not doing my job. I thought I tracked those things down for why we would be putting in that fan motor actually had something to do with the server. And I understand that. But it is, you don't just sign off on anything, on everything. It is very important. And it's where, if there are errors, they can happen in grants. I said, that's why somebody watches over it. So that was me doing my due diligence. And I just asked a lot of questions like I always did when I was on council. And I think you're actually very lucky to have somebody that asks questions to see what exactly is happening. And it is something that people had been asking for a long time. When is this going to happen? When is this going to happen? Where are we working? And but I actually want to give Stella a chance to talk because she had some concerns with the,
Go for it.
yes.
Okay, I'm still a freshman here, so in coming on board, I'm only going to say what I came upon. But before I do, I just want to say I would be happy to offer my solicitation of the ARPA money requirements. I'm a little concerned when we either overstate or understate what is the requirements of this money. So I think we need to just see where we're getting our citations about the responsibility of the money and what is needed, required by the end of December. And I would be happy to provide that where my citations are, so that we're all talking the same.
I just wanted to point out a little clarification on that. So there was an amendment made at the end of last year to the definition of what obligation meant. And that either had to be in a contract, a purchase order, or subaward, which is how a lot of people have been obligating the money is through a subaward,
Right.
which
To another entity.
would be like exactly what we're talking about here, or if this were put into a different, if it were put into a capital project, it could be paid for. It wouldn't have to actually be encumbered in that way because it falls under, you wouldn't need a PO for it, right?
No,
You wouldn't need a
it's-
total contract signed
You
yet
need
because
like
you'd
a
have,
sub-grantee document
Right.
executed by the receiver.
right.
But it's
And that would take our obligation of spending it and we wouldn't have to send it back.
where the gray area would be is if you treated GSET as a sub-grantee. That would be kind of gray and you'd have to explore that. But you're right. But it was very clear that it could not be. The recovery money is meant to help cities and towns recover, not to sustain them.
Right.
So you can't really use it for salary increases that for people who are just going to continue to do their work. That's not really recovering, that's sustaining. So that, I think we all agree, is that case. But there is a lot of latitude in defining how we use the money. And yes, it is the mayor who has to do the due diligence across all the needs of the city, as well as the enterprise entities, to decide what is the best use of this money, because I have a little bit more latitude than I do with other sources of money. So I think that's where all of this comes from.
But that's a different conversation.
Yes, that is.
That's, if you just said that in March, instead of going through all this, and now here we are in October having the same conversation.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
If you just came out and said in March, hey, we're not gonna pay for this, you're on your own, go do something, then people would have known,
So,
but here we are, and you're talking about sidewalks and other stuff, well, that's great, go do it. But just let these guys off the hook. I don't, dragging GSET through the coals for these last 6 months has not helped anybody in this town. You got customers worried about their service. You got other people thinking they're never gonna get service again now. You got all this stuff going on. And who paid the price?
so I think what I asked the mayor is, how can I help? I know this meeting was called by GSET, so I don't want to make assumptions about what the committee expected. Maybe the committee just wanted to give space and time. So if that's the case, but if I were asked, what is important if I were on the Ways and Means Committee, is I would use this as a precursor to the greater discussions we're going to have about across the city when we get into our budgeting cycle about where is the best use of money, of the monies that we have, of the monies that we hope to get, where do we best put those resources? And so that's what I would look at this as. Not an opportunity to, I'm not going to adjudicate or comment on things that happened before I came on the scene, because that's really not my place. But I will say what the context when I came in, I wanted to get my arms around what all these enterprise funds were and what they were doing and how they were doing. So I will just give the committee, if they're interested, what I saw coming in, not all these things, not at the detail level, but I was given an ARPA budget that the total award was 5.5 million. And that 1.035, $1,035,000 was on the ARPA line. Then before the city accountant Angelica left, there apparently was an exchange of information, and that budget went down to 729 or something. I saw adjustments to the budget. to I want to say 729, right? And then it left, of that 729, most of it was already spent, like 600 some thousand, and was shown as spent. And the balance left was 106,000, as you had mentioned here. And I was told at the time that's to make sure that money's there for Northfield. After some exchange, I have now been, as of today, instructed to restore to that budget up to 800,000. Again, most of that is already spent or encumbered, but we're leaving 106 plus an additional 56. But the bottom line is this: of the 5.5 million of ARPA money, 1.1 million and change was set aside for GSET originally, at least when the year started. It was down to 729 right before Angelica left. Now it is back up to 800. So the difference, I think, Councilman, I say Councilman M because I was right.
That's fine.
I'm going to call you Councilman M. At least it's M. So what we are talking about, in fact, is $235,000 of the ARPA money to restore to GSET. Now, to me, you might say that doesn't sound like a lot, but there still is due diligence that needs to be done. So one way we do due diligence, even if the money is in the budget, whether it's a 729 or the 800 or 1.035 million, is that the bills to be paid come through to accounting after they are approved by the approving body. And it's mainly, I approve some stuff that comes through accounting or, so forth. The mayor approves all the department stuff that comes through her. We pay it out of the general fund. And then eventually we have to get paid back. When you said we haven't gotten the additional 56 back, it's in your budget. Of that 800,000, 56 was restored from that 729. We do have a separate bank account for you, the TD Bank, and that is mainly for their receipts of all their monies that come in. But when the bills come in, we pay it. And that's how we maintain some kind of oversight and control. Even if it is coming out of ARPA or it's coming out of other funds, we have to maintain control, at least in disbursement of paying the bills. So I just want to be clear about that. But I just want to say that 235 doesn't seem like a lot. And when we talk about, I'll just say what I found, because the only thing I had to go on when I came here was to look at the FY23 audited. Now, I know that there is some difference between the municipal type of accounting and accounting for audit purposes. But the first thing I said to the mayor was, I'm going to look at these things that they call business type activities, and they call them enterprise funds. And there's water, sewer, and GSET are considered the three enterprise. And again, I'm just looking at the report. So in the fiscal year 23, your auditor reported that there was, which almost jived with that, there was an operating loss, and whatever went into those expenses we can debate, was an operating loss of 207,000. Then when you throw on other types of like interest expense, which is to service the bonds, it came to a loss of 309,000 in fiscal year 23. So I just said, well, that's true of the sewer and water. They also have losses. So I'm like, so you have an enterprise or an MLP, as they say, that had in FY23 an operating loss. So you might say, well, is that a bad year? Did we pick up some expensive? The loss been worse if we didn't subsidize it in somehow. But in any case, whatever arrived at that, how did it contribute to the overall balance sheet of this business? And I just want to make sure we're all looking at this the same way. But right now, what the balance sheet shows as of the end of 23 is that the GSET business had assets of 5.6 million against liabilities of 8 million, leaving a net asset, or what people call retained earnings, of negative 2.4 million. So when I hear things like, oh, we'll use retained earnings or we'll add more debt, we'll issue more bond, I say, wow, on a already very weak and fragile balance sheet. I'm just a newbie and there could be something I'm reading wrong, but this is the audited financial statement for FY23. So when we talk about bonds, what this report says, as of the end of 23, we have debt. This organization or this enterprise is carrying 4.2 million of debt due to bonds. And based on probably some amortization over this year that just ended, the bond debt is more like now 3.8 million that you're servicing. So if you need to go out to the bond market, then you're just going to add to that 3.8 million. Yeah, you're going to amortize some stuff, but you're also going to add to it. And I think what's on hand to you as the finance committee is to say, how much do we want to debt? How much more credit card debt or how much of a mortgage can we afford to put? Yes, it would be GSET that would say, yeah, we'll pay that. It is capital. For capital purchase, we use debt, but paying back that debt, the interest, which was 129,000 this particular year, the interest expense plus the cash flow to principal does take its toll on an organization. So you have to say, do we want to do that? Do we want to go out to the bond? Interest rates, our bond rating now is AA plus, but if it goes down one step, you will see a totally different interest burden. So I think about that. And I think about if you are all in and you want to see GSET expand and they give you a compelling, plan to how to achieve the goal of the city, which is to have broadband access throughout the city, then is it worth going into debt? Because we already have 3.8, almost 4 million of debt. How much more will be needed? And is there a plan to service that debt with ongoing revenue? That's how I kind of look at this. I don't like to point fingers at or say somebody read wrong, and I don't get in the mayor's business about approving or not approving invoices and so forth. I just look at it as a finance director, as an analyst, and saying, will the city find this important enough to use of the ARPA money, to use 20% of the ARPA money that we are fortunate to have? And are we prepared, even if we give the 235,000, okay, fine, but the bonds we're all talking about, can we afford it? Do we want to mortgage our future of GSET? What happens? It's a very sexy right now because apparently you're getting grants, very sexy, very jealous because my town in Savoy doesn't have any of this. But I would say that, you would have to do some projections and say, will you really be self-supporting with rates and payers when this is a very, as you said, a very competitive industry? Somebody could come along and just wipe out your business model. And then where would you go? But you've left like 4.4 million of debt plus another 4 million. I don't know. I worry about that. And that's why that's how I look at it.
We'll let them respond first.
Well, profit and loss and balance sheet are not the same thing, as Stella knows. So my response to that is, of course, everything ought to be considered in that framework. GSET has been considered in that framework. When you're starting up, which is what we have said, there are losses that come through. The accountant, you can see at the end of this year, said that we are sustainable over the last 3 years. That's what it says. We have a budget this year that says since we aren't paying extraordinary one-time costs, which were $230,000 last year, which we think of as a lot of money, $235,000, then we will operationally be in a position to thrive. The mayor is correct. The Northville will add quite a few customers. We have quite a few people in the north who will want to add GSET services. So I understand what Stella's saying, but this is a calculation that happens. GSET's a little different. We're not just an enterprise fund. We're an MLP. That's not the same thing. Literally every administration I've worked with has said, well, you're just an enterprise fund. It's not true. What I would say is when you think about where we're headed, where our budget is now, if in fact, because we're still saying if after all this time, that money does come back, and I will commit to just what you're talking about. All I'm saying is I want to have the chance to talk to you about it. That's all. That's all I'm saying. Because there are sometimes things that are more directly related than you might think. And I want to. No, go ahead.
I just want to talk about the balance sheet for a second. So within Munis, there is a revenue account and there's an expense account. And somewhere in here, that is in the back of this, right? Yeah. So the balance sheet is the deferred revenue, which is our liability, right? So I have a billing that I send out bills. Laura, you get one. Some of those are paid on time, some of those aren't. Some of the liabilities are insurance claims that we have sent if somebody hits a pole and we have to do work. And, unfortunately, everybody doesn't have the best insurance. And I'll send out an invoice to the insurance company for $10,000, but they only pay $1,200 of that. So the balance sheet is not the actuals. So, to be clear, there are two accounts within Munis. One is called a deferred revenue account. And the other one, I can't think of what it's called right now, but I think it's our profit. So that is literally what we say we're going to get. And I believe that that's what Stella is talking about. That's not what actually came in. That is why you will see water and sewer and GSET all have a negative number there. We didn't have a negative number. It's because we hadn't received all of those retained earnings yet.
May I just say?
Yeah.
That this is your audit and the auditor can defend it because I wasn't here. Of course, I will be here for the FY '24. It is based on an accrual basis, which means they take into account these deferred or accrued receivables, accrued payables. So unless they're doing something, when you say this is not a cash basis, this is an accrual basis audit done according to GAAP, adjusted for the kooky little different ways municipalities do their during the year type of bookkeeping. So I don't want to say that I was here, but it is a prepared, very expensive financial audit done by a firm, a very large reputable firm. And so it's just one look at how these different, and they don't say it's an enterprise, they call it business activities. There's two enterprise funds and one business activity. And they separate that from what they call the governmental activity, which is the general fund. So I don't want to get into a debate with you. I would rather the auditor defend this. But I just telling you as a reader of this audit and many, many financial statements, I look at the balance sheet as the overall health. When I was a banker, I went straight to the balance sheet to say, yeah, you're going to have good years, bad years, in the black, in the red, good year, whatever. But in the end, how does it accumulate to the health of the organization? How much debt are you carrying into the, can you pay this debt back and when? How much retained earnings can you have to absorb future losses? How much cash do you have compared to non-cash assets? Because if you have non-cash assets, then you don't have a lot of liquidity. And so what happens if you really need that liquidity because you have like a major union strike and you have to pay out all these things so that's just how I look at it. So I'm not saying, I think the auditor can defend the way they prepare these and why they show a balance sheet for a business activity called GSET and why they show that. It is on an accrual basis. It is not, it does not go on a cash basis where there is the effective time. It just is what it is. I don't know how FY '24 is going to look. We're not expected to have the auditor start to work on that until January. So, but the sooner I think we can get to it, the more we can say, yeah, well, how did the picture change? But also to the auditor to come in and say, this is how I prepared this. This is how I looked at the liabilities. This is how I looked at the deferred or soon to be receivables of all these different entities. And so that's all I'm just saying for context.
Well, I will.
So if I could.
I got
Alan?
guys.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Councilor Adair's had his hand up for quite a time. No, he's
So
just.
go ahead,
he's
go ahead and finish, Sharon.
But you wanted to go, I'm
Sure. Just really quickly, it's a combination of comments and questions. So just regarding the future of GSET, this meeting, and what the purpose of it is the current financial future of GSET. And that's really important to the council in general. Everyone wants to see GSET succeed at this table, and I have zero doubt about that whatsoever. As far as Stella's comment about the future of the organization, I think we have evidence that it's going to be successful if we continue investing, in the sense that Comcast ran away. Like they had a Comcast store here in town and now it's in Holyoke because they're mad at us, basically. And I have a good friend of mine lives up in Bernston and he constantly complains about Greenfield creating GSET because he's jealous. And, I have another friend who works at Chick-fil-A Electric Light and they're extending fiber potentially to Ludlow because they have their own municipal light plant. And I would love a future in which Greenfield is servicing, via our municipally owned corporation, our neighboring communities. That would be ideal. And that's a heck of a way to bring in revenue if you're servicing towns that don't want to deal with Comcast anymore. John and I had a back and forth back in July. I never followed up on it, about the idea of potentially eminent domaining the polls. I love the idea. In the article I found about this town called Hastings in Nebraska, and this is a light plant that basically sees their polls. They paid $1.1 million for 1,600 polls. That works out to like $600 a poll. And I love the idea of us being the licensee to these companies that are being obstructionists. You know, Verizon and Eversource are the same thing as Comcast and Charter. They're, you know, publicly traded companies that have a shareholder obligation, and that shareholder obligation means making us pay so they don't have to. So whatever we need to do, you know, not whatever we need to do to have GSET succeed. I don't want to be too extreme. If we need to chop down all the polls, no. So I would love to see that idea explored. That's obviously not in the council's purview. That's a question for the executive branch. But I wonder if that could be potentially a cost-saving measure in the course of doing this, because the other piece is all of these polls, the licenses on them. It feels like the Eversource and Verizon just take a dart and throw it at the board and pick a price they want us to pay. And they could, apparently they get to charge us after they do the work as well. And it feels like a hostage situation. Like it's really not a good place for the city to be financially. So that's, again, a big reason I like to pursue that. A question I have, though, is about the status, and it's come up a couple of times, of GSET as an MLP, municipal light plant. I looked at the Department of Public Utilities website. We're not listed there. How come, and how do we fix that?
Because we are a telecommunications only MLP. So DPU has state oversight over MLPs that include a power component. The Department of Telecommunications, DTC, was asked to be oversight over telecommunications only MLPs, and they declined. There's actually a bill in the legislature right now that says it will be the oversight for telecommunications only MLPs. I am in favor of that, although the thought of all the additional paperwork makes me sort of shudder a little bit. But I think it would be a good thing. I don't think it's to our benefit to have no state oversight. I think it's healthier all around if there were, and if that means we do a lot more paperwork, well, Vern can tell you about the paperwork we do for the FCC. We do a lot of paperwork already. So I think, I'm sorry. So I think that is, as far as oversight is concerned, beyond GSET's general oversight, because the difference between an enterprise fund and an MLP is that general oversight for an MLP is vested in the board of commissioners who, for all things related to the MLP, with the exception of appointment, takes the place of the mayor. That's what the enabling legislation says. So
You're the post office.
we have some, kind of. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying to work with the city, and I'm happy to do that. I want to take just a quick second and say all balance sheets are snapshots in time. That's why you have balance sheets. And if you talk about a younger company that has more debt as they're growing, it's always going to look that way. So you have to think, I would never tell you that not looking at what potential liabilities are in the future is a bad idea. I've run my own businesses for many years. I agree with that. But you also have to think about growth potential and revenue potential, which isn't captured in the same way in a balance sheet and is more in the P&L. Operationally, GSET is at that point. We are not from a capital perspective. We do still have debt. So asking if there should be more debt, that's a perfectly reasonable question. I would say operationally that we generate enough revenue that we could certainly handle it, especially considering we're going to have about a 25% reduction in our debt service expenses, because every bit of that debt is not exactly even in how it's paid off. It goes like this, and then it goes like that, because we paid off a bunch of bonds. So our ability to handle new bonds is going to be significantly better in the upcoming year. So I don't want to argue about auditors either. I don't want to argue about auditors.
I just wanted to say, and is it, you're right, a balance sheet is a snapshot in time. However, you have that time, we measure performance on a year as the full period, which is why so much money and resources are put into an audit. You have a snapshot, but you have a snapshot at the same point in time, year to year. It also is a cumulative thing. Yes, it's a snapshot of cash just at that time, or receivables or payables, but it is a cumulative snapshot of retained earnings.
Right.
Well, ultimately. So that's not saying, and that changes with the performance year to year. So I don't think we want to kind of debate what a balance sheet is. But I will say this, but you're absolutely, if you, if the committee, if the council, that you say GSET must continue, even if we might be looking at an investment of more debt, then I guess what I would ask when you say you're a business, that I think we should ask, I'm not saying we can mandate it, but we should ask for a pro forma projection or forecast. And as things change, you tell us what your set of assumptions are for revenue, how will that come? What's your set of assumptions for expense and why? And so instead of looking at just what happened and kind of reliving that, let's look forward and let's have a projection. And then as things change, we call it in the finance world a rolling budget. But what we do is so we can always say, okay, we're back on track. Oh, we didn't expect that. Oh, look, we got this. And we're going to use that source of money. But if we're going to talk about, don't look at the audit, look at the future, then let's put some numbers to the future, I guess is what I'm saying. Put a pro forma projection, projected budget, and then let's watch and see how it does and how your assumptions change or don't change, or you accomplish it, you meet your goals ahead of time or later. But I think that's what all we're asking is it possible to put some numbers to, as best as you can, to the future that you see unfolding, where debt coming in will help you, where paying off debt will be shown to lower that burden. I think if we can do a pro forma type of thing like that, I think it would help us when we hear all these things about what we're going to do, to help the council assess, is this still the best use of money for the goal we want for Greenfield? That's all I'm saying.
Well, that's not really our job right now. We approved the budget in the spring.
Mhm.
And now we have the fiscal year to go. The mayor's in charge, is administrator of the money. And so it's up to her to decide what to do. It's not up to us to tell her. She has to decide. You keep asking us for our input. We have no input. We already gave our input. We approved the budget.
Well, I agree and disagree with that at the same time. I think it's a rolling, not to use the term maybe incorrect, but a rolling budget throughout the year. We did an approval of a budget at that moment for this fiscal year. The reason I believe that this committee exists as well, and you're right, we can't make the financial decisions. A lot of people want us to make those financial decisions, but I think a big portion of our role here is to advise the mayor as to what we're getting from constituents. She's obviously getting, letters and stuff from constituents as well, or to ask questions to help as many folks as we can understand where that's coming from. And those questions can arise. School questions have arisen, right? These questions have arisen. Nobody likes to be questioned like after the fact. You only want to talk about it during budget season, then say, leave me alone for 10 months. But some of these can be handled throughout the year, depending on what comes up. So it's not all in your face, really overwhelming when you're going through the entire budget book. And that's after it's already been seen and, adjusted by the executive branch. So I think these types of conversations, though, I know can sometimes get heated throughout and may to some people seem pointless, or why are we talking about it? I think they're actually more important to do throughout, kind of like having the assessors come in and give us a report, not the month that we're voting on the tax rate, like to give information ahead of time so people can understand how it's happening better. But I think you had your hand up.
No, I guess two things. One, I do want to set aside the future of DSET, because I think that's a bigger conversation that we're not here to have. You mentioned, Stella, that this is like 1/5 of the ARPA budget.
The ARPA funding.
Yes, the ARPA overall spending potentially. I will just say that doesn't bother me, because I think ARPA was there for things like digital equity, which is really important to a town like Greenfield, and we have to put ourselves back in the pandemic when this money came.
Mhm.
And there were a lot of have and have nots being able to be part of our economy, schools, et cetera. So I think that's important. And the other is infrastructure, and
Right.
people don't people are starting to consider internet access is vital infrastructure. It's what's going to bring business to this town, because if people don't have fast, reliable for their business, they're out of luck. So,
Right.
but I'm wondering, can we as a body, if we wanted to, pass a motion, I don't know the right words, that could ask the mayor to restore.
I mean, we could definitely vote to make a recommendation. There's no motion to be had. Other than that, we could, if we want to be more of a in spirit kind of vote than anything else.
Because it sounds like that's what the mayor is
Yeah, I mean.
looking for, that guidance.
Well, especially if she's looking for some sort of direction, I think that's,
Mhm.
again, one of the other pieces why we're here. We can't make the decision,
Right.
but it's other heads, other, people focusing on what is happening with finance to see that. And I will agree with you that I was going to say similar to the same thing that, where do we want to spend our money?
Mhm.
Down the road. I think infrastructure of this nature, though I hate the way the world's going digital, I can't stand it. I wish we would go back. Maybe, I don't know, like little tape recorder like that, that's how you left the voicemail, but I can't stand the instantaneousness that's risen from this. How helpful it is in some ways, it sucks in others. But I think regardless of my own feelings on it, it's important to not only, especially like, I take, for instance, there's a lot of people who think there's some way we would be able to invest in downtown as if we were going to get stores back like it was 1950. That is not happening. That's not realistic. That'd be a money pit. And it has been in a lot of places, and they've wasted their money. And things are changing. And if this means investing more money or utilizing ARPA money for getting more people on board, obviously that will speak to the viability of the company. And also that, and digital equity, it would grant people in a different area access to like work from home. There's a lot of jobs that are trying to be competitive, having work from home. Well, now you've got a whole section of, how many thousands of people that aren't essentially afforded that opportunity. And of course, there's pros and cons to wherever you live. But I think that this is one that's attainable myself. And I personally, I think if we can use money that's bonus, for lack of a better term, bonus money that we wouldn't have expected to expedite something like this, I think it's a good investment. Perhaps throughout this conversation, I've tried to find out an analogy of why this might seem a little bit more confusing as to why things haven't gotten to where they are. And I agree with Stella that having like almost like a 3-year plan or 5-year plan that you're trying to project what's going to be there and seeing how you meet those goals. I mean, the city does it in a lot of our, especially with capital, and is helpful because if you think of like right now, let's say we were to take DPW's recommendations from 2021 and what they plan to do by 2024. And then, we assumed that there was going to be this allotment of money and this amount was going to be done. Well, we've all seen costs rise just like everywhere. And now all of a sudden, a couple of years back, you get hit with, asphalt went up, I don't know, like 50%, like crazy like that. Well, now you thought you allocated the money, right? And you had it there, especially trying to look down 2-3 years. But even their current contracts that haven't quite been signed yet, some of the contracts that had been, those contractors had to eat it. But some that hadn't been yet, well, now all of a sudden that price went up. So you thought you were only going to need, $500,000 to do this road or this sidewalk or whatever it was. And then come bid time, now you're looking at $750,000, $800,000. So you either gotta say, we're gonna do it and we're gonna find another way to get the money, or nope, sorry. So I mean, I think that's, I don't know if that's a completely comparable analogy, but it's kind of the way that I was rolling through on how all of these things could change. And
So if we're gonna make a recommendation, we're gonna make a recommendation for a specific purpose. What the mayor was suggesting with John, that if I'm gonna do this, you gotta show me it's for build out. In order to build up. I mean, do we do that, or we just?
I mean, you get, like I said, again, this is a spirit, the spirit of a recommendation.
Right, you can go first.
If I would welcome your input, and that's part of one of the reasons that we're here. I found it difficult because we weren't building out. That's all. Nothing for nothing. I understand where you're coming from. It wasn't happening. It was promised. If you would like to spend the rest of this knowing it's going to be for licenses, where it's already on polls, I'm fine. That I think it should be used for that and not, I don't want to sign anything more for that I would consider operational, but for licenses and finishing the north build first, I would love to have something like that. I also have the substation that is weighing on my mind. I'd love to hear your input on that as well. So that wasn't on the topic. It wasn't on that, but they're tough decisions to make. I could see this wasn't happening with the intended purpose, but if that's what you want, just conditioning it on make ready and getting the north build done, I'm certainly amenable to that. It's just advice. There are other municipalities that make grant funding subject to appropriation. I'd be happy to do that. But this was tough because it wasn't what but why don't you just give me your opinion? Fine. Love to hear it.
I'm going to make one clarifying question, just so I'm absolutely clear. So if we returned, or I'm sorry, if we made a recommendation to the mayor to return the ARPA money, what would be the breakdown between completing the north build? And I know it's all connected, but the licenses for the north build and everything associated with the north build and the legacy. So what's of this remaining money, what would go where?
Currently, there's about $80,000 left in the account for the north build. The mayor said she's going to bring it up. 729 to 800 is actually $71,000 more. That would be about $151,000. I really would like to go back and do a check, but it does seem that should get us at least into the neighborhood. And if we said we're going to do that, we're going to do that check and make sure that we're on top of what we need to spend to do that. And the rest of it will go towards legacy make ready, right? I'm fine with that.
And
Fair enough.
the total for legacy well, and we don't know exactly how much each license is going to cost.
It's going to be somewhere, no, because even the ones the mayor read went from $37,000 to $52,000. It really depends on the status of the polls in each area. So as an average, we have been looking at, and I don't think the mayor's, I'm not sure I could offer any more exact figure than the mayor has. I think that's the right neighborhood. I think it's a little dangerous to expand out from that, but I think the spirit of what she's doing is right. And I think if we can, and if we want to do it, I agree it isn't for this vote, but if we want to think about the context of working with the town to give some visibility as to what we think going forward, I don't have any problem with that. I say what all people who are responsible for this are, the farther out it gets, the harder it is to be accurate. But as an exercise, I don't know if I heard you right or not. Sounds like that's something you're thinking about doing in a number of areas. And
not necessarily.
no, oh, so this
No,
would
I
be
mean,
just for
Oh, yeah, I'm
GSET?
just picking you on. Of course I'm doing it.
But as a general exercise, I think that would be good because I do think we have to work on getting better at how we communicate with each other.
That's-
I am more than willing to do that. I think that if the mayor accepts your recommendation, that would be a great relief to us, and it would certainly lower any bond request we would come to you with.
Essentially save the ratepayers money.
It would, exactly. And I also think, I mean, infrastructure and broadband and water and to some extent sewer are specifically picked out
Mhm.
in the ARPA grant as where they recommend this money be spent, because the idea was to have this money go towards lasting investments in infrastructure in town and many other things too. I'm not trying to say this, but I think if we had that outcome and we were able to work on, as far as ARPA is concerned, making sure that we're communicating well, I will absolutely commit to that to you.
Okay.
Then taking that recommendation, I think would be good for everyone. And like I said, it's not the same thing, but if we want to talk about longer term, what we see coming up, I'll do that. I don't have any trouble with that at all.
I didn't hear a dollar amount, total dollar amount of, we're going to recommend
We
to
split
the
the,
mayor, how much.
get you up to 185, is
No,
that?
well, it's
235, 235. We get you back up to the 1,035,000, which was what I saw.
There you go.
235,000.
There you go.
35.
There you go.
which doesn't include the 56 that's not in.
That's on
So-
top of the 56.
Right.
Right,
Yes.
that, right,
You're at 800 committed to that.
Okay.
right, okay. That would be,
So really, it would be
Get you to the 1,035,000.
bringing back the 305.
I mean, I would say, other than us, possibly going over like a different dollar amount, that it could be. I mean, reading kind of the room, I think the idea is to try to restore as much of that as possible to it. Now, mind you, there are other things that have come up, and that's where I get where you're saying the decision is hard. But I think, not knowing your full list of what might possibly be needed, because that's a little bit heavier than our lift, I think. But that's at least what I would say is as close to as possible. That would be my recommendation personally, to try to restore it as much as possible.
To the 1,035,000. That was
Right.
where we left off.
yeah, I don't think anybody's talking about beyond.
Right. I mean, we can.
No, but you know what?
I mean, I may talk about that at home all by myself, but.
You know, you're right. The mayor and I have to look at other things. We just had something come up with IT,
Oh,
which
man.
was the data, public safety data center.
Well, I was gonna say, do we
We need to write this down.
now, or was the discussion good enough?
I mean, again, like I said, we can make whatever recommendation we want. It's in the spirit of it, but I think we've
I think it
probably
would be
touched on it.
fine to make recommend, we're all
Yeah,
here
let's do that.
because we wanted to have your input.
Suggesting that we put some aside for something different, or?
I'm saying that's not
Right.
our job
That's not our job.
necessarily to say, right? Just as it's not our job to tell her what to do
Right.
in regards to GSAT, but we can still recommend either way. And like I said, I'm not privy to all of the day-to-day information and things that might come up that they may need to draw money away from, just like if this wasn't ARPA money, if it was general fund,
Yeah.
right? We wouldn't know necessarily. We'd be kind of a lot of times told afterwards, but since, like I said, it is there, if there are other sources that could be used to take care of some of whatever else might have been thought of, to use some of this money for.
We're continuing the grant search, correct? I mean, grants are gonna be ongoing.
Always.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I just say, if you make that recommendation, I am very confident that we can work together in good faith. And if the mayor has to make a decision that takes money elsewhere, it's our job to say, okay, this is what the consequence of that will be. But I think if we take that recommendation as a guideline and we can just sit down and work together, I think it will be fine.
Because I'm not wanting to have to fully bond all of this either. And that's where I'm like finding,
Right.
if you can get it, if it can be possible to fully do it, so the bond is going to be less, that'd be great. Anytime, that's great. I'm not, as a former counselor, had said, like, I understand that debt is incurred in order to do things in a municipality. Can't just pay with cash. So, yeah, like I said, there's a lot more decisions that get made, but I mean, yeah, I think however you guys want
Wrote it
to
down.
frame a recommendation. We can, it's non-binding.
We recommend that the mayor restore to GSET as close as possible to the original 1,085,000.
35.
Sorry, 35, thank you. I've heard 85 too, as possible with priority on North Build and licenses. Is that?
Agreeable?
Make ready.
Legacy, make ready.
Maybe get rid of the word priority. Not that it matters, but.
That agreeable to the subcommittee?
Vote.
Sure. Why not? All those in favor of a recommendation to the mayor on what Councilor Wondolowski just said? Right, that's all five, so there's no opposition.
Thank you.
No statement.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Don't raise my rates.
Not at right at the end.
But now you can go
Just
home,
at the beginning.
now you can go home and watch the Yankee game on GSET.
Oh my God.
He's not.
All right, wait, I just changed my vote. Changed my vote. No Yankees.
You can come over us.
No Yankees.
I don't want any, I'm not trying to raise controversial issue here. How come?
I'm gonna move on. I don't want to be.
How come we can't get GCTV?
Are we adjourned?
Because our contract from Comcast, the peg
All right,
money that they get,
Astro,
they would lose it all.
you could do that question.
Oh, Chris. See you, bye. Okay.
Next meeting is Tuesday, November 12th, 2024 at 6 PM, City Hall Meeting Room right here, second floor and Zoom hybrid. Unless otherwise posted, at that I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right. And all those in favor?
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your time, everybody.
Yeah.
Except